The anticipation and excitement of going to a location that you've never photographed before is what draws me into travel and landscape photography so much. Not knowing how the light's going to work, not knowing what the weather's going to do, not knowing the real subjects that you're going to shoot. You can read as many books as you want and you can look online as much as possible, but until you're stood there on your own 2 feet with the sun on your back and breathing in the air of that landscape, you'll never really know what to expect. So I'm here in Death Valley National Park in California. And this is a location I've wanted to visit for many years. I did have the opportunity a few years ago to come here, but there were some serious storms and all the roads got washed out, so I never had the opportunity. And then Wex Photographic got in touch and said, "Hey Tom, why don't you go and shoot a couple of videos for us?" So I was like, yeah, okay. And they said I could go anywhere I want. So it didn't take me long to decide that I'd really quite fancy a bit of Death Valley. So here I am. And it seems I've brought the weather with me because it's absolutely chucking it down. So I had a coffee and I was hoping the rain was going to let up, but it just didn't. And then I was going to go and find a campsite. And it suddenly dawned on me that, I'm only here once. Like, when am I going to come here again? So I've made myself a little bit waterproof. The rain cover on my bag there, and I've also got a rain cover on this camera, sort of. And I thought I'd venture out into the salt flats, and it's different. It's something else. There is nothing. So making an image in these conditions and trying to find a composition is going to be a real challenge. But what else am I going to do? So, aside from the pouring rain, one of the challenges here is finding a composition, because as you can see, there's nothing here. And so it's important to actually figure out what your subject is, what you're focusing on. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. I want to focus on these lovely hexagonal shapes in the salt. But the trouble is, there's an abundance of them, so it's really, really challenging to try and make sense of the chaos and try and find symmetry or some kind of shape or form. We don't have any light. It would be nice if we had some lovely golden light casting shadows in the salt. We don't have that. And we've got torrential rain. The only time I've experienced rain like this is in the UK and Iceland. So well done, Death Valley. Only I can come to the hottest, driest place on earth and experience this. It's crazy. Anyway, I've found my composition. I'm going to talk you through briefly what I'm going to do now. I'm not using any filters at all. It's not necessary. The scene is very well balanced. We don't have any bright areas or any areas that are too dark. And there is very little. It's going to be an incredibly minimalist shot, which I like. And I think the attraction for this, for me, is the fact that we are in Death Valley that only sees 2 inches of rain a year, and it just so happens we're getting all of that rain right now. So to actually have, dark grey skies and wet salt flats, they're not flooded but they're wet. I think all this is quite unusual. So I'm going to go for a very peaceful, minimalist shot. I'm using a wide angle lens, 16mm, so I can really emphasize the foreground. It's all about stretching out and making the most of that hexagonal shape. Also, because I'm incredibly close to my subject, which is this shape here in the salt, it's not going to be possible for me to get perfect focus all the way through the image. So I'm going to focus stack this photograph. And to do that, I focus at 3 different points within the image. 1 to infinity, 1 about a third into the image, and 1 at the closest point to the lens. And then it's really simple in Photoshop to merge those 3 images and give me perfect focus all the way through. This 5D Mark IV's incredibly well weather sealed, so I'm not worried. It's only out, the rain's not too bad right now, and it's only out for a few minutes while I get this shot, and then I'll be going back in the bag. So I'm shooting at f11, which is a lovely aperture to get a nice sharp image. And my shutter speed is at 20th of a second, and everything's on manual, and I'll be manually focusing as well. So the first image I've focused to infinity. Be very careful not to knock your camera when you're changing your focal points, because that will make it very difficult to stitch your image. 2-second timer so I don't experience any camera shake. Okay, this is the second image, focused about a third into the scene. And now I'm focusing at the nearest point. And there we have it, 3 images, all identical but with different focal points. And yeah, I think it's a really nice image. It's different, it's simple, it's minimalist. And the challenge wasn't taking the photograph, the challenge was finding the photograph. And that is quite often the case, especially in a barren, empty, desolate landscape such as this. So yeah, right, I need to get out of the rain, find a campsite and get dry. So you may notice that I'm wearing a hat and sunglasses. That's because it stopped raining and the sun is breaking through the clouds. So now that the sun's out and the rain has passed, the lighting's incredibly harsh. We're probably about an hour and a half from sunset, and I'm going to use this time to try and find the perfect hexagonal salt formation. So I'm very happy to report I have found a salt formation that I'm happy with. It's just this one here, let me show you. So composition is really important here, because we don't necessarily have an obvious subject. So everything in the picture has to feel right, everything has to feel balanced, everything has to be in the right place. So it's really important that when you're working with minimalist scenes like this one, it's really important that you don't just plonk your tripod down and then start shooting away, getting all excited. It's so important to just take your camera handheld and just work the scene. Have a look from head height, have a look from low down, shift a bit left, shift a bit right, and you'll see the difference it makes, especially when you're shooting really wide and you have lots of interest in the foreground. You know, those minute shifts left and right, up and down, can make a big difference to how your image looks. So the sun has now dropped behind the mountains, and the result is this lovely cool blue lights. Now, we're not in the blue hour yet, but we kind of are, because we're in a valley and we're not getting any yellow light from the sun whatsoever. And it gives this lovely, soft, subdued, ambient light. It's absolutely gorgeous. You know, compared to before when the salt flats were in that harsh, direct sunlight, and it was very contrasty and it was very difficult to manage those highlights and shadows. Now, as the sun's dropped, everything is lovely and balanced. Now, I have my composition framed, and I have dropped in a 2-stop ND medium edge graduated filter, just because the top of the clouds on the horizon there, where the clouds meet the blue sky, that was just a little bit bright, so I wanted to pull that back a touch. So I always like to use the histogram on my live view, which gives me, you know, a very accurate exposure, and I can see if any shadows or highlights are clipping. It's also really good in bright sunlight, because the direct sunshine tends to bounce off the LCD screen, and that's no good. You can never really judge your exposure from looking at your screen alone. So I'm going to take this image now. I'm going to do exactly what I did this morning and focus stack it. That's because I'm shooting at 16mm. My foreground is 2 feet from my lens. Infinity is 50-60 miles away. There's no way of getting all of that in focus in one shot. So I'm just going to take 3 images and stack them in Photoshop. Now, this is almost identical to the composition I shot this morning, and what's really important to know is that by visiting the same location time and time again in different conditions, you can get completely different results. And this is a fine example of the difference light can make and the difference rain can make, and conditions and cloud and atmosphere and everything, you know? Anyway, better grab this shot before it gets dark. F11, 3 images. First image, focus to infinity. Second image is approximately 1/3 into the frame. And the third image is that immediate foreground. And the result, I think, is quite a striking image. So the sun is just starting to rise. We're still shooting the same location, the same subject as yesterday, which is Death Valley and the Salt Flats. Only this time we're about 5,000 feet above them. Yesterday we were just down there, and this morning we've come high above, and for good reason. Because of all the rain yesterday, there was so much moisture, so much wetness. All of that cleared by the end of the afternoon, which meant there was always going to be a good chance of a cloud inversion. And I think this is quite special, quite rare, and for me this is just phenomenal. So I'm going to shoot a panoramic of these mountains. When you shoot a panoramic, there's a couple of things to consider. One is make sure that your tripod is perfectly level, because if it isn't, when you shoot the panoramic and you move the camera across, every time you move the camera around, it drops down and you end up with a panoramic stitch that is wonky, and you end up losing half of your image. So always make sure you've got a level tripod. The second thing to consider is your composition. It's very difficult to pre-visualize how you think your panoramic's going to look, and the important thing to do is make sure you have an idea of where you want your image to start and end, and then shoot past that. So give yourself more pixels than you need. Shoot more of the image than you're going to use, because when you stitch the images together in the software, quite often what happens is you lose areas of your image around the edge where it moves and shifts the pixels to stitch them together. So when I photograph in a new area such as this, I have no idea how the light's going to work and what's going to happen. So it's always best to, once you've decided on your composition, I like to just shoot as the light changes. So I end up with a choice of images, because it would be very foolish of me and very arrogant for me to think that I can just nail this first time, perfect light. You know, what if the light doesn't materialize and this scene is at its best now? You know, and there's no way I'm going to take that risk, especially not, you know, because I'm shooting digital. So I'm going to shoot a series of panoramics as the light changes. Now, one of the problems that might cause is you end up with so many images, and you put them into Lightroom and you can just see just loads of images, and it's easy to get lost and not know which image was from which set. And so what I like to do is, when I start a panoramic, I cover the lens with my left hand like so, and when I finish a panoramic, cover it with my right hand, and then I know that the image, you know, they go from left to right, and I know where the panoramic starts and where it ends, rather than looking at a grid view of 100 images that all look identical. Oh, this is just absolutely gorgeous. So I'm keeping my f-stop at f9. My shutter speed will change as the ambient light changes. And yeah, I'm going to take this image now because the light is just starting to catch. Another really good tip when shooting a panoramic is to just wait a second between each image, because as you move your camera, it's going to be shaking. You might not be able to see it, but it will be there. Slight camera shake will make your images soft, and that's no good. Perfect. Absolutely gorgeous. So that's me about done now. The light has gone from absolutely gorgeous to just terrible in the matter of just a few minutes, and that's what happens, especially at this kind of altitude. We're quite high up here, so now the light's really washed out and it's no good. So we're definitely going to call it a day. I think we've been very lucky to see the conditions that we've had during my time here in Death Valley and that we've seen in this video, because they are very rare. And I feel so blessed not only to have experienced Death Valley, but to experience it in such unusual conditions such as yesterday and this morning. So yeah, I need to say a massive thank you to Wex Photographic for sending me out here. And if you like this video, subscribe to the channel. There's going to be another video coming from me, and I'm very much looking forward to it. But until then, I'm going to go and have some coffee and stay up here all morning and just enjoy the views, because this is gorgeous. Right? Until next time, bye for now.